Welcome everybody. My name is Terry Cochran, Director of Alumni Relations here at Brock, and a proud Brock grad from 1997. Took communication studies here, and I'm proud to say I'm putting it to good use in the alumni office. So during this virtual homecoming, we have many alumni joining us locally from across Canada and internationally. And knowing this, we would like to begin, as we always do, with a land acknowledgement and recognize the Indigenous communities that originally inhabited the land in which we come together today. So Brock acknowledges that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom to continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging this reminds us that our great standard of living is related to the resources and friendship of our Indigenous people. So with that, we'll move to a couple housekeeping. I mentioned that it is being recorded, and all of these webinars will be available after at the Homecoming Hub. And finally, we encourage any questions. You can just type them in the chat, and I will moderate while the conversation's going on. So with that out of the way, I would like to introduce, I'll introduce Greg Plata, who is our Alumni Association president and SPIMA alumnus. So after graduating sport management in 2008, Greg went on to a career in marketing and advertising that took him out west and landed at WestJet. And Greg has been awarded Marketing Magazine's Top 30 Under 30 Award and 2 Cannes Lions, the Oscars of marketing, I've come to understand, largely due to his work as a creative force behind WestJet's popular Christmas Miracles campaign. Greg then returned home to Ontario and joined Naked Creative on the senior management team, and became involved in the Terry O'Malley lecture series and the Dobson case study competitions. And we roped him into the Alumni Association, and we're happy to have him as our current president. And so with that, I will turn it over to you, Greg.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Terry. Appreciate the kind words. But today is not about me. Today is about a conversation that we're going to have. And we're honored to be able to have Interim President Lynn Wells joining us here today. Lynn, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us and be a part of our virtual homecoming as the tradition continues. I know that we've had a chance to meet. You've come to speak with the Alumni Association Board of Directors last year. However, our alumni community doesn't often have that opportunity to interact with our president like this. So as much as this is a discussion between the two of us, it should be a discussion with the Brock community. And we encourage everyone that's joined us here today to join the conversation. So if you have any questions for our esteemed guest, please put them in the chat. Terry will be keeping an eye on them, and we'll be checking in with him along the way. So Lynn, many of us know you as our current interim president and vice chancellor and all the great work you've done at Brock. But for those that might be or might not be familiar with your story and how you got to where you are today, it would be great if we could start with an overview of your professional background and your journey to where we are today. I'm sure that our audience would much prefer to hear it from you than to have me drone on reading your extensive bio. So Lynn, if we could start with that, that would be fantastic.
Wonderful. Thanks, Greg, and good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining. I'm struck by the fact that Greg and I seem to have gone through the same journey, which is began in Ontario and moved west and then came back. So we're on a similar circuit. I'm a Southern Ontarian by birth. I was born near Windsor, Ontario, and did degrees at York and Western in English literature with a minor degree in French literature as well, and ended up leaving Ontario in 1997 for a job at the University of Regina, where I was happily working as an English professor, and then ended up in a succession of administrative roles, including Associate Dean, Dean of Arts, Associate Vice President Academic. And it was that last role that led to a very interesting experience, which is I moved from University of Regina itself to its affiliate institution, First Nations University of Canada. Which, if you don't know about that, it is Canada's only fully Indigenous university level institution. And around that time, it was going through a few difficulties. So I ended up moving over as Vice President Academic. It was supposed to be for 2 months. 2 months turned into 2 years. 2 years turned into 7. But it was a tremendous experience for me, and I learned so much about Indigenous people, Indigenous culture, about the history of the residential school system, and about what we all need to be doing to be moving forward towards true reconciliation. And after that role finished, it was time to look for a new horizon. So I ended up at MacEwan University in Alberta for a couple of years in a role that was called Associate Vice President, Students and Teaching. And so it gave me a really intensive understanding of student services, student supports, working with students associations, but also the interface between teaching and learning and student success. So again, I always say each job teaches me what I need to know for the next job. And I was fortunate that that next job was here at Brock as Provost and Vice President Academic. Showed up a few months after the pandemic began onto an empty campus and with no students on it. And so it was an interesting way to start at a new institution. But of course, over the last year, lots of things have happened. I'm sure we'll talk about some of those. And now I am pleased to play 2 roles at the same time, which is Interim President and Provost and Vice President Academic, with the support of the amazing teams at Brock. So they make me look good every day. And I'm grateful to all the wonderful people around me. So I'll stop there. Thanks, Greg.
No, that's fantastic. Quite the accomplishments, quite the journey. And we're glad you did make your way back from the West and you did land here, and we're thrilled to have you on campus and acting as our interim president and vice chancellor. So we've had the chance to hear about your professional endeavors. And for those who haven't had the chance to meet you or get to know you, can you give us a little bit about yourself outside the 4 walls of Brock U, perhaps a glimpse into who you are when you're not on campus?
When I'm not on campus, yes, I'm a very busy mom, stepmom, grandma included. I have my own 2 children remained at MacEwan University to finish their degrees, one in psychology and a basketball player, and the other in journalism. So similar to Terry's background. I hope she ends up getting a job just as you did. I've got 2 stepkids in Saskatchewan. My husband and I have, so we have 4 between us. We have 3 grandkids. I'm a passionate basketball fan. Love watching my son play basketball, hoping to see him do that in the next month or so for the first time in a year and a half. Also a huge tennis fan, watch lots and lots of tennis. And of course, being an English professor, I love to read, and I'm always reading something.
Fantastic. Bit of a basketball junkie myself. So a few things we can chat about perhaps at upcoming meetings or events. And a great excuse to be able to get back out west, or at least to the prairies. A good excuse to go travel and visit friends and family along the way. Speaking of getting back to, for all the challenges the pandemic presented, it also created many opportunities. And those opportunities, I'm talking about more personal and professional in a sense, to reinvent and reinvest ourselves, to try new things, pick up new hobbies, and really challenge ourselves to learn and grow. I know I picked up a few throughout, some which I've maintained and some which are, fleeting, if you will. But can you share a few stories of any new hobbies or skills you picked up or took up throughout the lockdown?
Yeah, well, I will say that one of the things that hit me hardest about the pandemic was that I couldn't go to the gym. And that was it was so much part of my daily life. And I really felt almost a kind of mourning, that I couldn't go to the gym every day. It was really my stress relief. So, I'm lucky here in St. Catharines to live 3 blocks from the Welland Canal. So I've taken to, long walks, and I've also discovered podcasts this year. So I have listened to many, hours and hours of podcasts, which, particularly things about the pandemic situation, but, also, social issues, ethical issues, all sorts of things. And it's been a great opportunity to get some exercise and actually to think about some things at the same time.
Totally, a chance to kind of marry both through
Yeah.
those long walks. It's a great way to plug in and again be able to pull from new experiences and old experiences alike with the spoken word there. So that's fantastic. I mean, you talk about the gym and being active. I like to say I try to. I'm sitting here in my de facto office / gym, which has kind of laid dormant for the past month and a half on the ladder. But that said, glad to hear getting out and enjoying the last of this good weather before winter comes. Kind of on a similar path here, the pandemic has also challenged leaders in new ways. How do you feel you've changed as a leader over that time, and what have you learned about leadership from this experience?
Yeah, I think the pandemic has challenged a lot of people in leadership, and I keep reflecting on the fact that leadership really makes a difference in terms of how well a particular community does in a situation like this. I mean, we've seen some good examples, and we've certainly seen some pretty bad examples. I won't call out any jurisdictions, but I think we could probably all identify a few. I said one of the things I've had to learn through the pandemic is how to keep people engaged in this format. How to interact with people. Up to about 6 weeks ago, I had met, I think, 20 of my colleagues at Brock in person because everyone was off site as they needed to be, and trying to build those relationships when you can't go out for lunch with somebody or meet them for a coffee or just have those kind of human interactions is very hard. If everybody's just a head on a screen, it's hard to build those relationships with people. So partly I used my constant walking to say to a colleague, hey, how about we meet at the canal on Sunday and go for a long walk, and because that was something that was considered safe to do. So we do that. So building relationships with people is challenging, not only because we're kind of disembodied, but because people interact with one another differently in a virtual setting. People can be inclined to be a little less civil in online formats, to hide behind their screens, or post things in chats, or just be less compassionate and less inclined to listen or understand because they have this mediated experience of being on a virtual setting. So that was really tough. But certainly what I found here at Brock is things were always changing. Every day, even up till yesterday, public health conditions change all the time. The government regulations change all the time. The needs of our faculty, staff, and students are constantly evolving. So that means being able to react continually, to engage, to consult, to keep talking to people, to make sure that everybody's brought along. It was very important to create teams of people who took ownership of particular issues. And I think more than any other time in my career, I've had to trust people to just say, here's a project, please take it away and make the best decisions you can. And come when you need help or you need guidance. But I am not a micromanaging kind of leader. I really do trust the people around me, but because things were changing so constantly and there was so much to do in such short periods of time, it really meant creating that team environment where people would pick up projects and take them away. And implementing the vaccine mandate is an incredible example of that. We had really 2 weeks to put in place something brand new that had to conform to public health guidelines, to legislative requirements, to our own internal policies and procedures, interface with our Senate, and so on. And to do that for a community of over 20,000 people with no new money, no new people, and no new tech in 2 weeks, that's a challenge. And I have to say that the Brock team did an extraordinary job of implementing. And I found that the role that I could play most usefully in that was not to get in their way when they were figuring things out on an operational level, but to help people focus on principles. And I find keeping the focus on principles the best way, the highest quality way to make decisions in a university, and probably many other contexts. So the two principles that we really stuck to over and over again were what do we need to do in terms of the public health requirements, and what do we need to do to serve our students. And that when you can bear down on those two principles, other things kind of fall into line. We also put a high priority on academic decision making. So do we switch a course online because someone simply wants to teach online? That's not the right reason in my mind to change the delivery of a course. That decision should be based on good pedagogical and academic reasoning, not on individual preference. And that's that was difficult for some people. People said, the institution should be flexible enough to meet my needs as an individual. But I said, we really focused on public health, student priorities, and good academic decision making.
Fantastic. I mean, a lot there. And I want to touch on a few things there, because you mentioned, starting with a new team, only 20 of which you had met at that time, and then understanding the role that this online engagement, team building, learning, sharing has kind of taken and evolved. But as time went on, and we even noticed this with our own company, starting to lose a little bit of sight, just like you said, of that human element, understanding there is someone behind the screen. They're not in the screen. There's someone that the human side, and that can kind of get lost along the way. So I love the initiatives that you took there, where you could, to be safe along the way, to ensure that you haven't met many of these folks and you were building a team throughout the pandemic to address ever-evolving changes, but also to understand the human side. And I think, I saw that firsthand with the O'Malley and Dobson case study. Typically, this is an event, dependent on collaboration. Students who have never met coming together to compete in a case study, a business case study competition nonetheless, where creativity really shines through, and to watch what these students were able to do working remotely, never having met. There were some emotional moments there where the winners are those who had even just competed together. That wave of relief that comes over, and it was crazy to think that they had never met in person. So for me, just to watch what the student body had been able to do to evolve, it wasn't easy, don't get me wrong, and we heard the stories of the behind the scenes. It wasn't just what was delivered, but this is something that everyone has felt, even right up to the president. So thank you for sharing with that. I do see some questions coming in, and they are direct messages to me. I would ask that if everyone could send those to Terry, that would be fantastic. I got a bunch of things going up on the screen here.
They're coming to me too, Greg.
Perfect.
They're coming to us both.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
Do we want to touch on a couple right now, Terry?
Sure. Well, the first one, Lynn, you were just kind of talking about it, but it was more of like a day in the life of a pandemic president, and how much of your day is putting out fires these days, or have you been able to find some sense of normalcy in your role?
Great. No, thanks. That's a great question. Putting out fires, I think, is a constant thing for people in roles as provosts, and I think in a different way for presidents. And presidents tend to get engaged in the fire putting out only when it's absolutely necessary, right? So presidents are to focus at a more strategic level, be more external facing, engaging with colleagues in the sector and government and donors and so on. But in my provost role, there certainly always is some fire suppression, I guess. Sorry, I'm trying to think of a good noun for that, but yeah. But I have a great faith in the teams around me. I'm a real believer in empowering deans, for instance, to be the CEOs of their faculties, and to have the leadership of their faculties, and to make those decisions. I was the Dean of Arts at the University of Regina. It was a huge faculty, and I had the confidence of the provost there to make decisions on behalf of my faculty every day. And I think that's very important. I'm a big believer in spreading accountability throughout the institution. in having leaders across the institution accountable for their own portfolios and their own areas. Now, the pandemic, of course, put a monkey wrench into some of that, because as I said, there were so many changing conditions and so many decisions that had to be made really on a daily basis. And we've had our emergency management team that was stood up at the beginning of the pandemic has only recently been stood down for a time, and we're hoping for the foreseeable future that we don't need to think of this as an emergency anymore. But really working with I have a group called the Senior Academic Leadership Team. They're amazing in terms of providing guidance. When I assumed the second role as interim president, I created a small group that I call the Academic Cabinet, just a small group of academic leaders that I meet with every week to just say, tell me what's going on in the academic world, tell me what's going on with programming, tell me what's going on with student supports. And having that small group of support has been tremendous on the academic side. We've also recently hired a new Vice President of Administration, Ken Chan, who comes to us with tremendous experience from government and from other industries. And he's been really dynamic in picking up projects and moving them forward. And he also, before coming to us, served as Assistant Deputy Minister in charge of the vaccine rollout for Ontario. So a tremendous help to have someone with that kind of background. So it's a mix. Now that we have everyone back to campus and things are just starting to roll along, as they normally do in universities, that nice feeling of people going to class and professors teaching and doing their research and things happening on campus. I think we can look away from, starting every meeting with a conversation of COVID. I keep saying, I will be very happy when we get to a point where not every meeting is about COVID to some extent, and we can actually focus on the strategic future of the institution, which we need to do, of course.
Awesome. Any other questions at this point, Terry?
There is another one, but it's kind of just anticipating what's coming. We can work it in a little later, if that's
foreshadowing, a bit of a cliffhanger, Terry.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it. Well, we kind of touched on this a little bit. Needless to say, there has been changes to the way that Brock operates. Both pandemic related and also, the evolution in terms of technology. Can you talk a little bit about, the role of online education? Not to say maybe it is here to stay, but in its current state and potentially future state and the role it would play?
Absolutely. So before the pandemic, my understanding is that there was some online learning at Brock, but not a great deal. So I came from 20 plus years at the University of Regina and its affiliates, and that institution has had really developed online learning for 30 years plus. Right? So it was a shift when I came here to realize that this was kind of new at Brock, this idea of having an array of program delivery options for students. And we can't thank COVID for much, but one of the things that COVID did do is that it forced a lot of us who are maybe reluctant to engage with technology in a serious way to have to learn it all at once. And I know that for some faculty members, the idea of saying, oh, I'm online teaching, it's not for me. I've always been in the classroom. I'm used to talking to people face to face. There's no way I can do this. All those people had to do it. There was absolutely no choice about it. And so now we have, faculty and our part-time instructors who have acquired a lot of skill over the last year in teaching online. Some like it better than others. Some can hardly wait to never do it again. But many faculty, I think, have learned that having some elements of what we call e-learning, so online presence, even as a supplement to in-person delivery, actually is a great benefit to students and also an enhancement to their teaching. So since we've developed all of this skill, and students, of course, are more accustomed to learning online, it's something that we need to continue to move forward. We're working on a digital learning strategy that will have full engagement with our faculty and students to look at how we can continue to build on the knowledge gained, the skills gained over the last year to have a more diverse program offering. And this facilitates a number of things, but it's certainly accessibility for international students who are trying to join us from abroad, accessibility for students from different backgrounds, so adult learners, people wanting to study part-time, and so on. And I'm pleased to see, I see April Dawn Blackwell has joined the session today, and that's great. April Dawn is our new AVP of Professional and Continuing Studies. So the access created by online learning options will help us reach new student populations and also deepen our accessibility, as I said, for people in remote communities, people, working parents, all sorts of people. So it is something we will continue, and we're fortunate to have the Center for Pedagogical Innovation. That's a very, very strong team there, great supports. And we're also in the process of considering the acquisition of a new learning management system that will up our game in terms of digital learning as well.
Fantastic. I might have to see if I can get some time with April Dawn, because for me, that's fascinating. Again, trying to understand, what that right mix is and how to be able to continue that, whether that is, you're looking to continue your education or even from the professional side. It's going to be fascinating because right now, I'd be remiss to say if we even know, what the right answer is or what the right mix is, but things are changing every day. And, part of that is the fun stuff, if you will, and learning together and figuring it out together. I do see Bilal has his hand up. I know he's on the road, safely on the road. So Bilal, if you'd like to jump in with the next question.
Yeah, no, thanks, Greg. I'm actually not in the driver's seat, so it's not a problem. Lynn, I think you've touched on this a little bit in your responses to other questions, but I wanted to get a better sense of your sort of vision for the university over the next year or two, considering the pandemic as well as your interim role as the president. So, are you looking to keep the ship stable, or is your priority to manage COVID, or you have other sort of goals and ideas in mind in terms of where you want to take the university over the next year or two before we have a new president in place?
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Bilal. That's a great question. So I'll start with your first question, was about keeping the ship stable, and I think that's absolutely what I need to do. I said we've come back through this transition back to campus, which has gone well. Complicated but well. And what the board asked me to do when I assumed the interim position was first and foremost to ensure the stability of what they call the core business: teaching, research, student learning, student supports. Make sure that's going well. And I think we're well on the way to ensuring that the transition is giving that kind of stability around core business. Now, certainly, interim presidents have a certain period of time, but we're also guided by a strategic plan that is larger than any individual in this role. It's a community document, as you know, approved by the Senate and by the board. And so ongoing implementation of the priorities of the strategic plan will guide everything I do during this period as interim president. And that, of course, means moving forward with some projects that will extend well beyond the next 2 years. I've mentioned one of them, which is the creation of a continuing education and professional studies division that April Dawn is assisting with. This is, I think, going to be really a wonderful direction for Brock so that we can engage with those new student populations, do things like micro-credentials, which are very hot these days, have that part-time study option, professional development, lifelong learning, those sorts of things. But there are also some long-term projects that have been decades in the waiting. One of those is our new Department of Engineering. We did the formal creation of the department on July 1st this past summer. We're in the process of hiring our first faculty members, and those faculty members will be developing the curriculum for the engineering program. And that's something that will be a really important part of Brock's future. We see that as an anchor program that we believe will evolve into its own faculty in the next 4 or 5 years. So really exciting direction there. We're also working on the relocation of our current programming in Hamilton to a new site in Burlington. And those programs there are teacher education and applied disability studies. And we'll be relocating those programs in the next year or two to Burlington. We have a partnership with the city of Burlington, but we also want to develop that new site as a place for diverse programming. We'll have access there to more students from the Greater Toronto area. It will be more attractive to international students entering the country. And going to a more accessible site in Burlington. So we're working with an academic planning team on what programming we might offer at the Burlington site, and that will continue. That will include our professional and continuing studies division that will be located in Burlington once we get that site up and going. So, presidents have a certain tenure in these jobs, but the position of president, of course, extends well beyond any individual to the overall leadership of the institution. But as always, we'll continue to be guided by the strategic plan, which is in place until 2025. And when the time comes, we'll start planning for the next one.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And thank you, Bilal, for the question there. Talking a lot about what the institution's been up to in terms of the operations and the future of. Want to talk a little bit about kind of today and our connection to the community. We know it's incredibly important, not just here locally in St. Catharines, but across the Southern Ontario region and beyond, looking at our global network of alumni, but I guess more regionally in that sense. Lynn, can you talk a little bit about why it's so important to ensure we have that deep connection and to extend those roots where possible, both physically where we can and then also virtually?
For sure. I think we all know that part of Brock's identity, its history, is a deep connection to the Niagara region. We've been working through a brand renewal exercise over the last year or so, and we'll be moving forward with that project this year. And what we've heard from all of the stakeholders, all the consultations, is that ongoing deep commitment to the Niagara community. From the founding of the institution as the Allentown Women's Institute, and people, I've heard the stories of just local people giving money from their paycheck to start the institution. That's a really compelling story, and that Brock commitment to the community remains extremely strong. And we're hearing that through the brand consultations, that people want to really emphasize the importance of our community connection. In the present term, that means supporting an economic and social recovery in the region. And we've been meeting a lot with municipal leaders, with chambers of commerce, to talk about what they need from Brock to help spur that economic and social recovery. There are some industries that have been hit hard by the pandemic. The tourism industry, for instance, is really taken a hit over the last year. What can we do to help support that industry as it gets back on its feet? But also, what new opportunities can we bring to Niagara, including the engineering program that's really geared around serving our local industry partners and meeting their needs. So we're designing it as an interdisciplinary program that will give the kind of more flexible, holistic graduates that they need to meet their local needs. So it's something we continue to take very seriously in the institution. It's right in the name of this strategic plan, right, in terms of our Niagara roots, but also, of course, our engagement nationally and internationally through research, through programming as well. So we are constantly meeting with local leaders and hearing what they have to say, inviting them onto campus, and that's something we'll continue to do.
Awesome. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention as a sport management alum supporting one of our very own, Aaron Matheny, the Canadian Summer Games being right around the corner. If you could mention just a few words about kind of Brock's role with the games, and I say right around the corner because it's been a long time coming, but something to look forward to.
You know what, and I know you all can't see out my window, but I have a spectacular view of the Canada Summer Games Park from my office window. I've watched the building go up over the last year and a half. The excitement is building. The games got bumped from August of 21 to August of 22 because of the pandemic, and that was a difficult decision, but I think the right one. But we're really excited about the games next summer, of the profile that they're going to give to Brock. We'll have the eyes of the nation on our university and our campus, of course, working with our consortium partners, the cities of Thorold and St. Catharines and the region of Niagara, to bring people to this part of Ontario, to show off our beautiful region, and to, of course, recruit students, which is something I'm always excited about. One thing that maybe not everybody knows is that under President Fearon's leadership, Brock has done a unique and interesting thing, which is to build academic and research programming in collaboration with the games. So we've had a special advisor, Dr. Julie Stevens, who has been working with faculty, with students across the institution, researchers, to build that academic programming in conjunction with the games. So there are research projects on various aspects of the games, and not just the athletic side, but the cultural side, equity, diversity, inclusion initiatives. We've had lots of student projects and student placements come out of our collaboration with the games. So there will be a real legacy for Brock, not only the building itself, and the amenities there, but also the academic research and student outcomes that we'll have.
Fantastic. As much as sport fuels competition, it also helps to build community, and community that can now help heal together, which is fantastic. So something I'm very much looking forward to as well. Terry, we'll do a quick check-in, a couple of questions there you have.
Sure. There's a couple community related ones. One you kind of spoke to, but just in the interest of getting the question out there, just some ideas of maybe Brock's positioning in the community, in terms of media and business, and some ideas to ensure that there's proper value and money for the students. And I guess on a related matter, speaking of students, there's a new engineering program that's been announced, and just wondering if it might be helpful to explore how that could be used to help other partnerships with other institutions like Laurentian who might be struggling financially.
Great. Okay, so lots of things there. So let me start with engineering and see if I pick up all the right pieces. As I mentioned, the engineering program that we're creating, we're doing so in consultation with our local partners, with our regional partners, hearing what they need from an engineering program. And I said what they're looking for is not so much traditional engineering in the vein of civil engineering, electrical engineering, software engineering. They want the grads to have the skills of all the basic areas of engineering, but what they really want are graduates who can go into a community setting and or an organization locally and problem solve. This is what we hear all the time from our local partners, is they want graduates who can come in, be flexible, adaptable, and solve real world problems, right, to meet the needs of the organizations that are out there. So we think this new engineering program will be a great benefit to the Niagara region. Will really help to lift the fortunes of many organizations. Will also help to recruit international students to the Niagara region and that's something we've heard loud and clear from our local partners, is this desire for Brock and Niagara College as well to serve as a magnet for international people coming into the region. Now, the other part of the question was related to Laurentian, and maybe, I guess probably thinking about financial sustainability. Of course, Laurentian went through its own experiences this year, and I'm happy to say that Brock is not in the same position as Laurentian. The institution is extremely well managed on the financial side. We have a balanced budget requirement under the board, and we met that last year, even with the rather serious financial shortfall that the pandemic caused for us through mostly lost ancillary revenue. People often think, well, you've lost probably tuition. That really wasn't where the impact was felt. It was felt on the ancillary side through having residences sitting empty, parking lots sitting empty, no food service on campus. We don't really think often that those aspects of the institution are critical to the financial sustainability, but they really are. They help to subsidize the academic mission. We managed through that, not only balanced our budget, but had a small surplus at the end of the year. We were fortunate to get some what's called COVID relief money from the province to help backfill some of those costs, which is great. We're obviously hoping for a much stronger this year now that we have people on campus. Our residences are really full, with lots of people on campus. So, in terms of financial sustainability in the sector, these, ongoing conversations about the fact that, the grant structure for universities hasn't changed in years. There's been a tuition freeze in place now for over 2 years, and really, probably not much prospect of it's being lifted in the next year. And these sector influences really do affect universities. We have to manage carefully, but we also have to continue our advocacy with government around stressing the importance of university education for society and for the province.
Awesome, thank you. We got another question from Bilal.
Thanks, Greg, and apologies for shifting the conversation in a different direction again. Dr. Wells, I also wanted to understand a little bit how you separate the two roles. You're obviously the interim president as well as the provost. So I'm sure there's many times people reach out to you almost every single day for a lot of different things. So do you pause and be like, or even go as far as to ask, hey, are you reaching out to me as the president or as the provost? Or do you make that reflection on your behalf as to, hey, am I going to make this decision as the president of the institution or as the provost? Because those two roles can have very sort of different decision-making aspects at times.
Thanks, Bilal. That again, another great question. I will say, I'm fortunate in that, I had some experience at First Nations University as well, serving as acting president and as vice president academic at the same time. So it feels strangely familiar to me to have both jobs at once for a while. And you're quite right that there are times when I need to think as a president and times when I need to think as a provost. The good news is that, being a provost really is a job that works very closely with the president. The provost is always involved in high-level decisions with the president anyway. So it's easier than you might think to kind of translate the two positions back and forth. I think it's been very important for me not to lose track of my provost role. right? It would be easy to just kind of put the emphasis on the president's side and say, you know, that has to take priority because it's more senior of the two positions. But the role of provost is very important in universities as the chief academic officer, and maintaining that important relationship with the deans, the vice provosts, and academic AVPs, but also with the students associations, with Senate, and so on. So you heard me mention earlier that I have a little group called the Academic Cabinet, and I said they help to keep me focused on the academic side, so that I have that touch point every week with that group to say, you know, what are the top 5 things going on the academic side of the institution, and making sure they're looked after. I'm supported, fortunately, by a wonderful chief of staff, Nick Dion, who keeps all of these things moving in the right direction and keeps me on track and very organized. And I have tremendous staff in the president's and provost's office as well. But as I said, you know, keeping an eye on the presidential role has been very important as well. Making sure that I keep that relationship with our board of trustees strong, the external relationships of the institution, with donors, with government officials. We just had the deputy minister here yesterday for 3 hours. So it's a balancing act. And I said it's not forever, which is a good thing. I wouldn't want to sustain this over more than 2 years, I don't think. But as I said, I have such tremendous people keeping me focused in both areas that it's really not very difficult.
I mean, you make it sound so easy, being that self-aware and having that system of checks and balances, because to be completely honest, for a lot of people, that can be that blind spot. And, ensuring that you have line of sight to everything, but it's not just simply your line of sight, ensuring you have that team that you trust, and that team that you're able to support them just as much. So great question, Bilal, and again, great answer, and a lesson I think we can all take away from that in terms of that self-awareness and being able to build that team of trust. I can't believe we only have 10 minutes left. A lot of questions here, but I want to touch on equity, diversity, and inclusion, because they're a key part of our focus as the BUAA, as much as they are for the university and the strategic plan. So Lynn, if you could touch on a few elements of what's going on at Brock to ensure that it continues to be a welcoming, caring, and compassionate community for all.
Of course, yeah. So there's so much to build on at Brock. Over his tenure, President Fearon was instrumental in supporting the Human Rights Task Force a number of years ago that had some key recommendations, one of which was the creation of an Office of Human Rights and Equity, and that office, of course, continues to be instrumental in the work of the institution. There was also this suggestion of the creation of a President's Advisory Committee on Human Rights, Equity, and Diversity, and that committee and its several subcommittees continues to do great work in the institution on an advisory level to me. So working very closely with PACRAD, as the acronym is known, and its many committees. I've been meeting recently with the Anti-Racism Caucus and the Black Caucus to hear what their priorities are. So again, lots of people doing good work, and it's the role of the president to make sure that that good work gets profiled, that the institutional priorities around equity, diversity, and inclusivity are a part of our everyday work. It can't be a kind of side thing or a specialized office. It has to be ingrained in the work of everyone in the institution. Now, you probably noticed I haven't said the word indigenization yet, but because I wanted to leave that for a special mention, of course, given my background working with First Nations, Métis and Inuit people in Saskatchewan, this is very close to my heart. We do have our wonderful Vice Provost of Indigenous Engagement, Dr. Robin Bourgeois, who's really helping to move us forward in terms of new Indigenous programming. We're in the middle of hiring a cluster hire of Indigenous faculty, which is really exciting, working on some transformational work around what is now called the Tecumseh Center, which has been connected to the Faculty of Education for several years, but we're working to expand that to a more interdisciplinary institution-wide institution. And we're fortunate to have two guiding bodies, the Aboriginal Education Council, which provides advice to me as president, but also the Two-Row Council, which is connected to Senate and the work of Senate. So, I think there's a really strong commitment at Brock to issues around equity, diversity, and inclusion, and to reconciliation. And of course, we're gearing up for the first National Day of Truth and Reconciliation on September 30th. That would give members of the Brock community to reflect on not only the past injustices suffered by Indigenous people in this country, but also the bright future that we can be part of as an educational institution.
Fantastic. And I think that leads nicely into the next question. Understanding that universities have been identified as critical to Canada's reconciliation efforts with Indigenous communities. What does reconciliation and decolonization look like at Brock?
And it's interesting because those two words are often kind of conflated, right, as the same thing, but they are quite different. So I'll start with decolonization. It's a harder thing to do than you would think. It's a critical thing to do, but it's a harder thing to do than you might think, because what decolonization means is actually looking at the structures of the institution and saying, how can we re-examine or reconceptualize how we do things in the institution to be more inclusive of Indigenous ways of knowing, of Indigenous practice, and so on. And that's, when universities are very old structures, right? We're very coming from over 1,000 years ago. Universities have grown up in a particular tradition, particularly in the West, with senates and tenure and all of these, structures that are in some ways very colonial. They're very much embedded in a kind of Western European tradition. So decolonizing the institution means, how do we do things differently? How do we make decisions differently? How do we consult differently? How do we bring different values into the institution? How do we talk to one another differently? And I was very fortunate at First Nations University to work in an institution where the vast majority of people were Indigenous people. And so decolonizing the institution was natural there. Right? We would start many meetings with ceremony, where we would sit in a ceremonial space there, and we would start with ceremony. And I can tell you, it starts a meeting completely differently when you have that kind of spiritual element. So in the Brock context, Robin Bourgeois is working with all of us to help us rethink our structures. And as a small example, a few weeks ago, we had our Senior Administrative Council annual retreat. And we started with a smudge and with Robin doing a presentation on some traditional Indigenous values. And I think it was new for a lot of people in the senior team, but the feedback I got was so positive. The people said, what a great way to actually think about spirit and about values and about people, rather than simply the business of the institution. So that's a long reflection on decolonization, but it's fascinating work. Reconciliation is different, and reconciliation is about relationships. I remember seeing a presentation when I was in Saskatchewan that by a First Nations leader who said reconciliation implies, because it has it means again, it means that we were ever in the right relationship, and that's something we need to think about, right? Have we ever in our history as Canadians had the right positive relationship with Indigenous people, and creating that relationship is certainly a reciprocal action, but it requires commitment on the part of non-Indigenous people. I find often when there are reconciliation events, people could have rely on the First Nations people, the Métis people, and Inuit people to do all the work and do all the presentations. And that's not what reconciliation is all about. It's really about those of us who are non-Indigenous people, first of all, understanding, coming to know the truth. There's the truth and reconciliation. We have to understand the truth of our history, not in a way that aims to make us feel badly as individuals, but is simply a recognition of the history of this country. But then a real effort to build relationships, to come to know people. And one of the things I'll be doing over the next year as the COVID conditions become less pressing, I'm hoping, is to go out to First Nations and Métis and Inuit communities in Ontario to meet directly with people, because you have to know people where they are. Simply inviting people to your campus is not true reconciliation. You have to go to their communities, meet their elders, offer protocol, and really truly listen to what Indigenous people are saying. And I can tell you, it's a phenomenal experience.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing. Like you said, it's one thing to know the difference between the two, but to understand the difference. I think that was a really good first step in helping us all collectively remind ourselves, but also understand the difference. And as you mentioned, September 30th, right around the corner, for all of us to take pause and observe. 10:58. Got more questions, but I think we'll wrap it with Dawson. Dawson, great hat. Let's throw to you for the last question, and we'll round it out.
Hi. Thank you for the presentation and the speech so far. I had a question, Dr. Wells. What does the word commitment mean to you? Your role must require a certain level of it. I'm working on commitment, but I even have a hard time watering my flowers once a week. I might be confusing it with responsibility, but just in general commitment. What does that mean to you?
Yeah. Oh, what a great, and thanks for that question, Dawson. And I will tell you, I have been trying to keep 2 tomato plants alive on my balcony for several months, and I am doing a really poor job of it. But just off the top of my head, I would say, oh, there you go. See that's alive. I would say that commitment requires action. Right? I mean, you can be you can have a strong belief that something should happen and that you should have a certain role into it. But commitment, I think, can only be demonstrated through action. So we can say, we're committed to equity, diversity, and inclusion. But if that commitment isn't backed up with concrete action, visible action, it's hollow. Right? It's a kind of sham belief or idea. So I would say in the broad context, when I say I'm committed to reconciliation in the institution, that means I need to do something. I can say it all day long, but unless I actually do something that's measurable, that has a positive impact on people, I wouldn't count that as a commitment. I would, I think we need to work in ethical ways. One of my research areas is I write about literature and ethics. And the difference between ethics and morality is that morality is what you hold in your heart, and ethics are what you do in the world. And I see commitment as very much connected to kind of ethical action in the world, of actually doing things that have a positive impact on people and communities.
Awesome. Dawson, thank you for the question. Lynn, thank you for the fantastic answer. I think that's a perfect place to wrap on. Thank you for your time, Lynn. Thank you everyone for joining today. I'd remind everyone to check the schedule. We have a lot of great virtual events upcoming over the weekend. Let's keep that Badger Pride going. It is homecoming. It's a tradition unlike any other. Let's continue it until we can get back in person, get back together, and be able to celebrate with each other. So again, thank you to everyone. Thank you, Dr. Lynn Wells, for joining us today. Terry, thank you to you and the alumni team. Have done a fantastic job setting up all of these events. A lot of work goes on behind the scenes, and I know Terry, Caitlin, Christine, and everyone else behind the scenes doing all the great work to ensure that this tradition does continue. So to everyone else, please enjoy the weekend. Hope to see you out there at other events, and thanks again.